Welcome back. Today's Mommy Moment features a local author and mom who coaches and mentors other moms who may need a little help facilitating deeper conversations with their children. Here to tell us more is writer and speaker Mandy Pallock. Good morning.
Good morning. It's so good to be here.
Hey, thanks for coming out here today. Mandy, I'm so curious. You have this book and it's all about parenting and advice about conversations with your kids. Tell me, what inspired you to write The Question Habit?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I was that quiet kid sitting as far away from a conversation as I could. And I had this loving, tenacious dad who would consistently invite me to have a conversation with him. And I discovered something I found sneakily awesome, which was if I asked the question first, then somebody else would start talking. And so it grew out of that, questions grew out of that, but seeing how really amazing they are as a conversation tool, now with my own kids, I can use them to deepen relationships too.
I love that. Now, besides asking these deep questions, what is your advice when it comes to facilitating conversations with your kids?
For sure. So thinking through active listening. So you're asking me a question and I can tell you're listening to me. And then I am responding to you. And so it takes two people. And so if I ask a question and then someone else is answering, I can communicate I'm interested by leaning in and putting my phone away and maintaining eye contact and having a great tone of voice. And those things all communicate to my child, I see you and you're important to me and I really value you.
I love it. Now, you're kind of bringing this book to life for us today because you are giving us some practical tips. What is your advice when it comes to facilitating these conversations, and what are those practical tips?
I am all for practical because if I can't remember it on a busy day in the car, then it's not going to work for me. Yes. And so for me, remember my perspective and position. And so perspective is the reminder that even if I'm speaking to my preteen who only communicates in grunts and single syllables, this is an amazing human that I love and that I want to get to know. And so I can remind myself of that before I have a conversation. And then position are those things we talked about, like lean in, put my phone away, look interested, and those great things. And then another practical tip is to ask specific questions first. So if I'm chatting with my third grader, I can say, who did you sit next to in history class? I can say, what are two things you did with your friend Michaela today? And when I ask specific questions instead of broad general questions, so much easier to answer, and it primes the pump for more conversations. And then my last and favorite is use tools and resources. There's no shame at all in using tools and resources that you can use to get the conversation going. So I have this card deck that you can get absolutely anywhere, Kristen.
So
and I've just put questions on them.
Oh, very, very
And
neat.
so we can play Go Fish, or I could ask you, well, what's the best thing that's happened to you today?
Oh, I love it. Probably the flower crowns, probably learning how to do that. That's, I feel like that's a practical tip.
So practical.
I love that, but like you said, it facilitates a conversation, especially if your kid might not be prone to share some of that information.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is we're a board game family, so we've taken a board game and we've just put conversation starters on it.
I love it.
When you're playing the very long game of Monopoly, you can have good conversations with it. So think, what am I already doing as a family, and how can I layer on great conversations and good questions in that?
I love it. Now, I'm dying to know, now these are maybe some fun, lighthearted conversations, but what about those deeper conversations, those more difficult conversations? What's your advice to maybe facilitate some of those?
Yeah, for sure, because it's just a matter of time before we get into a situation where our kiddo says something different than we agree with, or they're living out something than we agree with, and we want to have a conversation about that. We don't want to shut it down. We want to have that conversation. So I think, how can I turn this statement into a question? And so I can do that. I can turn it into a question, and I could ask someone, I could say, well, what do you mean by that? If they say something that surprises me, what do you mean by that? Or I can ask my kid, how do you know that? And then another question I could ask is, well, would you help me understand? Because I want to understand. And then, how did you come to that idea? And then the very last question is, can I take some time to think about it? Because I love that I don't have to have a response right away. I can think about it too.
That's a really, really great point. Mandy, this is such great advice. I know people are going to want to check out this book. Where can they go to find more information about you and to check out your book?
Thanks, Kristen. TheQuestionHabit.com has my book and speaking and connection things, and I'd love to stay in touch.
Thanks, Mandy. We appreciate your time today. Don't go anywhere. GDSA will be right back.